So, from the Mail Online, leaked files expose mass infiltration of UK firms by Chinese Communist Party, including AstraZeneca, Rolls-Royce, HSBC, and Jaguar Land Rover. Loyal members of Chinese Communist Party are working in British consulates, universities, and for some of the UK's leading companies, the Mail on Sunday can reveal. Leaked database of 1.95 million registered party members reveals how Beijing's malign influence now stretches into almost every corner of British life, including defense firms, banks, and pharmaceutical giants. Some members who swear oath to guard party secrets, be loyal to the party, work hard, fight for communism throughout my life, and never betray the party, are understood to have jobs in British consulates. So just think about that for a minute. Almost 2 million party members spread around the world, most of them in the West, I'm sure, and most of those in the West probably in the United States. An extraordinary leaked database of 1.95 million registered party members reveals how Beijing's malign influence now stretches to almost every corner of British life and, by extension, Western life. European, British, American, Canadian. 2 million people, that's a lot of people. Now there's the happy members. There's President Xi of China, permanent president for life, otherwise known as a dictator. And the party members. There are something like 1.4 billion people in China, and I think there's only 6.5 million, something like that, Communist Party members. So it's only about 0.5% of the population of China is a party member, if I'm doing my math correctly. It's very hard to get in. It's an exclusive club. So we're not talking about the Chinese people by and large here. We're talking about the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party. Okay, so here's some examples. A party member who studied at St. Andrews University worked at various consulates in Shanghai, including that of the UK. Okay, Chinese academics who swore an oath to the CCP attended British universities where they were involved in sensitive areas such as aerospace engineering and chemistry. There were also 600 party members who ended up working for HSBC and Standard Chartered, both British banks, and also the pharmaceutical giants Pfizer and AstraZeneca, which both, as far as I know, happen to be working on the COVID-19 vaccine at the moment. And they also work for firms with defense industry, including Airbus, Boeing, and Rolls-Royce. So they're spread throughout strategic industries, very important industries. These examples are from the UK, but by extension, you can extend that to pretty well any Western country. So here's the oath of loyalty, which party members must swear. New members of the Chinese Communist Party swear an oath of loyalty in front of a traditional flag bearing a hammer and sickle to signify proletarian solidarity. With fist raised, they say, "It is my will to join the Communist Party of China, uphold the party's program, observe the provisions of the party constitution, fulfill a party's members' duties, carry out the party's decisions, strictly observe party discipline, guard party secrets, be loyal to the party, work hard, fight for communism throughout my life," well, that's nice, "and be ready at all times to sacrifice my all for the party and the people, and never betray the party." So what that's basically saying is, if there are Chinese students or workers in the West who are members of the party, they're never going to be loyal to the country they're in. They are going to be loyal to the Chinese Communist Party, or they will be kicked out of the party, or they will be imprisoned, or they will be disappeared. And as we will see later, there's a lot of pressure on Chinese people in the West, especially students. So last week, John Ratcliffe, the U.S. Director of National Security, warned that China posed the greatest threat to democracy and freedom since the Second World War and was striving to dominate the planet economically, militarily, and technologically. Now, do you remember all that Russiagate bullshit from 2015-16 and the last 4 years? That was all a lie. That was all a scam. The real espionage has been done by China. The real infiltration is done by the Communist Party. 2 million members around the world and growing. And trust me, I've been around the world a few dozen times in the past for my work. There are Chinese people everywhere. I'm not saying there are Chinese Communist Party members, but you can bet that a percentage are. And they're not working for the country they are in. They're working for the Chinese Communist Party. And here's another example of a Chinese Communist Party member who was working in the same building just downstairs from MI6 spies in the UK, MI6 intelligence operatives, right in there. So from Ian Duncan Smith, with hopeless naivety, big business and universities that fail to understand that China is out to destroy our way of life. And by our way of life, he means the Western way of life. Okay, joining the ranks of the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP, is quite unlike signing up for a political party here or in any other democracy. It might seem closer to joining a crime family in the New York Mafia. Members have to swear overriding loyalty to the one party that has ruled China since the 1940s. They must pledge to guard party secrets, fight for communism. Okay, we've been through all that. Now here's interesting part. Swift, harsh punishment would result should they ever dare to break it. Belonging to the party is no mere formality. The CCP demands secrecy, cunning, and utterly ruthless discipline from its millions of members. Notoriously secretive, its authority is absolute. So you get the ideal here. He goes on to say, we have failed to recognize that at the core of China's system is a system of ideas and values that not only runs contrary to ours, but seeks to overcome it. The interests of the Communist Party come first. Small wonder then that Xi Jinping states openly that China will have the world's most powerful military forces in the world by 2049. The question today is this: to what degree have our institutions and big businesses been helping him achieve his goal? Well, I would say to a large extent. What's been going on for the last 40, almost 50 years is the shipping out of largely American but all Western jobs to China. Our political leaders, our corporate leaders, our business leaders have sold us out for cheap products. The factory you used to work in, or maybe your father or uncle used to work in, got shut down in the States and shipped to China, and in return we got cheap plastic shit from China and no jobs. Very few social services, an opioid crisis, high unemployment, and largely unemployment or low-wage service sector jobs, and the opioid crisis and high crime and a few other things. That's what happened. It was an exchange. We send our industry, our technology, our ingenuity and creativeness to China. In return, we get cheap shit, but our corporate overlords, the oligarchs, the Jeff Bezos and the Walmarts of the world, get cheap shit. They get profits from the low wages in China and the cheap shit they send back, but charging you for it. So you got screwed. You got nothing out of this. So this another article, how the Chinese Communist Party reveals that it's infiltrated many Western companies, including Australia. That's from news.com.au. Okay, more description of the same thing. Okay, so there's CCP branches set up inside Western companies where members, if called on, are answerable directly to the Communist Party and to President Xi himself. Okay, it's also going to embarrass some global companies who appear to have no plan in place to protect their intellectual property from theft, economic espionage, he said. Well, from my experience and from what I've seen going on for the last 20, 30 years, is Western globalist companies, corporatists, oligarchs, whatever you want to call them, they have no shame. Their money is their god. They don't give a shit about you. They don't give a shit about the worker or families or social cohesion, society at large, Western values, any kind of traditional values that might bring social harmony. It's all about the money. If they can make 10% more profit shipping the company and its secrets to China, they will do that. You have to understand that if you want to do business in China, you can't just set up a factory there, make it yourself, and then ship it back. They demand that you share the technology. And if for some reason they don't get the full technology, well, they will just reverse engineer it and get it anyway. In a system like China, they're very productive, they're very hardworking. I've worked in China. I worked in China for almost 2 years. I've worked with Chinese, alongside Chinese, with Chinese companies and people in various parts of the world, including Africa, the Middle East, and Asia. And as I said, including China itself. They are hardworking people. They are dedicated to their jobs to a large degree. But one thing they are not, and I hate to say this, they're generally, ever since the communist days anyway, 1949, they are not what you would call creative. They don't have the creative spark because their first obedience isn't to free thought or thinking outside the box or critical thinking. The first obedience is to the party, and those rules, those values are set in stone, at least in China. So they don't rely on homemade creativity in China for innovation. They rely on espionage, technological theft, stealing military secrets, stealing economic and corporate secrets about technology, software. It's all about the espionage and stealing. And of course, there's enough American politicians and American business leaders who are either too stupid, like Eric Swalwell, the Democrat representative who was involved on some level with Fang Fang the spy, as I did in my last video, or they're just too greedy. Combination of greed and stupidity, and just being downright vile people, I guess. Okay, so we see here China infiltrating Australia. I think people have known this already. More about infiltration. Now, here's something that's particularly bothersome and dangerous in my opinion. The Chinese Communist Party on the American campus. This is a speech by Mike Pompeo, the Secretary of State, on December 9th, 2020. So that was just a week ago or so, not very long ago. Okay, so he says, and it's important to come to talk with the American people about this because Americans must know how the Chinese Communist Party is poisoning the well of our higher education institutions for its own ends, and how those actions degrade our freedoms and American national security. If we don't educate ourselves, if we are not honest about what's taking place, we'll get schooled by Beijing. Now, it's taken this country, and indeed the entire free world, a long time to understand the trajectory that China is on today. In fact, we're not quite there everywhere in the world. There are many American scholars, often doing research funded by American taxpayers, that have been lured into the Chinese Communist Party's talent recruitment programs. The CCP pays them what is for them a fortune to do research related to the current fields for or in China, and then often uses the fruits of their brain power to build its military strength. A researcher from my home state of Kansas was caught up in this trap, as was the Harvard chemistry department head. Think about that. The Director of National Intelligence, John Ratcliffe, recently described the CCP strategy as rob, replicate, and replace. So that's a pretty clear description. Basically, the Chinese Communist Party strategy is technological theft in order to improve its own strategic position in the world. Improve its own military, its own space program, its own control on its own people, and its expanding control around the world. And that control is through either stupid people in the West or greedy people in the West, or maybe there's even some people in the West who have bought into the CCP's version of communism, and they're all for it. So yeah, so this is what you're getting. To move that down a bit. So Chinese students say free speech in the US is chilled by China. So there are many, this is from Voice of America, there are many Chinese students studying in the West, hundreds of thousands, if not more. Every year there are up to 400,000 Chinese students in the United States alone. But those people don't get a free pass from the Chinese Communist Party when they go to the West to study. They're on a leash. They're allowed to say certain things. They're encouraged to say certain things that are pro-China, but they cannot, for the most part, speak out against China, even when they're in the United States. The Chinese government, the Communist Party, has a very long reach. And from University World News, why did Columbia cancel Chinese rights violation event? This is how much pressure China can put on Western institutions, American institutions and universities. They donate heavily to American universities. Harvard alone, up to this point, has received $1 billion from China in various forms of funding and research funding. So they say, cancel an event, that event is going to be canceled probably. Okay, so this just says that China's 1,000 Talents program is basically just a way to recruit Western teachers, Western professors, Western intellectuals, and Western students, I imagine, even into their what is called a talent program, but in reality is to catch them up for intellectual theft, one way or the other, through bribery, through money, through blackmail. You have women like female Chinese spies like Christine Fang, who got involved with various American politicians, and you can bet that they've got a few things to hide at this point. So Harvard leads U.S. colleges that received $1 billion from China. So you can imagine with that kind of money and so many Chinese students putting money into the American university system, that if China says jump, for the most part, many American institutions, including the universities, are just going to say, oh, well, how high, sir? It's pretty, it's sad, it's pathetic, and it's dangerous. American universities are now the front line of the China-US Cold War. For decades, Communist China has cunningly exerted its influence, spread its propaganda, and conducted espionage on college campuses across America. I'm sorry to say this, but you would have to be pretty fucking stupid not to know that already. And it's really irritating that we had to put up with the fake, absolutely fake Russiagate, and Donald Trump is working for Putin, and Russia interfered with our election, when in fact the certain truth of the matter almost is that it's China who has the influence, that is China that is interfering, that is China that has infiltrated the West and the United States, and that is China who is interfering with elections and stealing technology. So in my last video I covered Democrat Eric Swalwell and his involvement with Chinese spy Fang or Christine Fang, and seems like many other Democrats, particularly California Democrats. There he is, man of the year in China. There's a funny little meme about what a stupid douchebag he is. Okay, see you later.